Most Americans are convinced that we're in the final decade of the American system. We're in the process of being overwhelmed by the world writ large. So let's start with a baseline that I think is a lot more accurate. It really comes down to this middle section of the map. This is the temperate zone of North America, the greater Midwest. This is the single largest chunk of arable land on the planet. Produces agricultural surpluses well in excess of most of the rest of the world combined every single year, and has now for 200 years. Overlaying that is something that's even more important: the interconnected waterways of the greater Mississippi Basin. You throw those in with the intercoastal, and you have about 16,000 miles of waterway. Now, why are waterways important? Well, moving things from A to B is a bitch. But floating them from A to B is really easy. It's 1/15 the cost. And once you factor in the cost of the infrastructure, the road, the rail, the ports, it's usually 1/50th the cost. And that's in flatlands. Start talking about mountains, you're talking about 1/75th the cost. The United States has more miles of waterway internally than the rest of the world has in total. The country that comes in second is Germany. They've got just under 2. There's also the spatial location. The United States is the only country in the world with a substantial population on both trading basins. So when Asia's in recession, we trade with the Europeans. When the Europeans are in recession, which they seem to live there now, we trade with the Asians. And when we're in recession, we share that with everybody. Since World War II, the United States has not imported a single recession, but we've exported every single one we had and caused a global one. The essential country. Whoa, we're going to move that down a touch. As a side effect of this location, the United States has an integrated, unified political and financial space that is unparalleled anywhere in the world. It has the world's largest consumer base by a factor of 3, and we have the world's most projection-capable military because there are no local threats. You put all this together, and this is something you cannot screw up, and Lord, have we tried. So if you take away nothing else from my presentation, take away this. Even in the worst case scenario, where somehow we have a third Obama term, and halfway through he dies and President George W. Bush comes back, and the whole time Secretary of State Bill Clinton and his intern brigade are represented us at all international forums, even in that situation, we're fine. Does it mean things are perfect? No. Does it mean we're taking the most advantage of our gifts? No. But we're fine. There are restrictions on American power. Let's talk about the biggest one. This is the world at night. Where the lights are, that's where the people with money are. How do we know? Because they have lights. Here is where all of the world's conventional oil and natural gas is. Now I'm going to click one more time. We're going to see where the shale is. Pay particular attention to the Arabian Peninsula and North America. Sometimes it really is that simple. It's all about co-location. When you put the oil and the gas at the same place where the people can use it, you don't have to worry about shipping it from A to B. So transport costs go from maritime, which are manageable, to negligible. You transport it within the same system that it's consumed in. Co-location has already, in the shale revolution, shaved about 100 to 150,000 barrels per day of global demand off simply because we're not bringing the stuff in from half a world away. Natural gas. It's a waste product. How many people are actually purposefully drilling for natural gas in this room or have clients who are? Now, how many are drilling for oil? Okay, note to self, this audience does not like to raise its hands. Because natural gas is a waste product in the American system right now, probably about 60% of total natural gas production in the United States is not something that people went for. It's just being dumped in the system. That means as long as there is shale oil at all, natural gas prices are not going to marginally rise over their current levels. If they hit 6, there will be enough production in existing sites to drive that number back down. You guys remember the vortexes? You got hit by them here, just like I got hit in Austin. 9 of them, right? Remember how we entered the winter with some of the largest reserves on record, and we exited the winter with some of the smallest? We only had one price spike. It lasted 11 days. Can you imagine if that had happened 10 years ago? The price spike would have lasted several years as we brought new stuff online. But because natural gas is a waste product, they just drill a little bit more when they have to. And it evens it out. So we get this for power prices. The green is the American baseline, blue is New York. New York City didn't use natural gas 3 years ago. They dropped fuel oil back in 2012. By 2013, they were entirely powered by natural gas. They couldn't have done that if it wasn't a glutted material. Red line, that's Texas. What I like to call the greater Texas area, which includes a number of areas that people, what's the one they call them? Oklahoma, I think, is one of them. This is the site of 5 of the 9 major producing zones in the country. So Texas is the most glutted with natural gas of anywhere in the system. Your black line, that's California. The black line is what we thought we were doomed to be experiencing just 5 years ago. This is an area that doesn't have shale, or they're not going to produce what they have, and they have steadily raising power prices. You know, this is what happens when you have an area that, where consumption of energy is legal but production is not. But this is the baseline. The United States now has the cheapest electricity in the developed world. And the mechanics behind why that's the case are going to last for at least the next 20 years. Worst case scenario. Oil looks even better. 2007, that's the hash year. That is when shale started to produce headline volumes that really mattered. And you can see the Mexican and the Canadian imports in there. But here's consumption. Now, 2007 was a magic year for 3 reasons. The first one that we're, of course, all painfully familiar with was the recession. That drove demand down, but it never recovered. That's because, 2, something called demand destruction. As people see oil prices above about $80, they start to make long-term choices in their own consumption profile. They buy a hybrid, they put solar panels up, they try to drive down their use. And that is something that is going to last, honestly, as long as shale is a technology, because the price point for shale is right up there with the demand destruction number. So there is a bit of a starvation diet issue here. Third, however, is demography. When you're 30, you drive to work, you carpool the kids. When you're 50, you just drive to work, and when you're 70, you don't have a car anymore because your kids took it away. Per capita oil demand declines with age. In 2007, the first of the boomers retired. So we are looking at secular oil demand decline for at least the next 15 years, probably longer. Now, it's not played out equally. Natural gas, unlike oil, is very difficult to move. You have to have a pre-existing pipeline system to take it from a pre-existing point of supply to a pre-existing point of demand. Can't put in a rail car, can't put in a truck, has to be in the pipe system. So the benefits are split. The numbers here are the percentage of electricity that comes from coal. Now, like it or not, the Obama administration has been incredibly successful at pushing coal out of the fuel mix, bit by bit, sometimes in big chunks. The next big regulation will indicate that coal ash is a toxic substance, which it is. And will basically say it has to be treated appropriately as opposed to just sitting out there. Once that happens, the price of coal is going to go up, the price of coal-based power is going to go up by at least half. And natural gas, glutted material, price insensitive, is going to start driving these numbers towards zero. Won't drive it to zero anywhere, but that's where we're going to see over the course of the next 10 years. Now, the red states, these are places that use a lot of coal, do not have access to shale formations, and the pipelines that bring the natural gas to them are pretty much maxed out. So these are the guys that have the biggest change to face. Right now it's relatively cheap coal power down there. It's about to become very expensive, kind of West Coast. The good news, of course, is that I live over here. Texas is now the world's leader in solar power, wind power, and natural gas power. Texas is, if we were a country, it would be Kuwait. Well, actually, no, we think bigger than Kuwait. It would be a Saudi Arabia. And there's nothing that is standing in the way. The Northeast, that gets a little bit greener every year as the Marcellus pumps out more and more. Utica's joined in the fun. The West Coast, of course, doesn't use shale, but they don't use much coal, so they don't have to do the switchover. So this is a good baseline just to look at. Midwest doesn't have a lot that's produced there, but shale's produced in a ring all the way around them. So they are the logical target for a lot of the pipeline expansions. The problem for the Canadians is all the Canadian pipelines that come to the United States go into the upper Midwest. So the Midwesterners are now getting involved in some very interesting negotiations where they're dictating price to the Canadians, which the Canadians don't like very much. And of course, when I say Canadians, I'm just talking Albertans here. So the Midwest price setters